Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this video is all about helping people through change and burnout prevention. So, as leaders, we're constantly facilitating change and helping people find ways to be able to meet organizational goals. But let's face it, people that you hire are humans. As humans, we can burn out, we can get stressed out, and quite frankly, we have to be aware of our humanness. And as leaders, we need to be able to help people be successful and feel successful in order to help the organization stay strong. Last thing we want to do is burn our people out as we work through organizational changes, because losing an employee puts the organization back just a little bit. So we want to keep the strength of what each person has to offer there in our organization, rather than training employees to be effective and then lose them to our competition, and hence making them a little bit stronger. So in this video, we're going to talk about all the ins and outs as it relates to organizational change. I know some of this will be some review, and a lot of this is really about you as a leader being able to look within and make sure that you have the right tools to be able to help people adapt to change, and you adapt to change too. So let's go back to the basics and talk about the types of changes in the workplace. First of all, there are structural changes, and this probably is one of the most severely resisted types of change. When new leaders come into play, or when people are moved to different departments, that could be really stressful. Task change is another one of those changes. These are changes in the environment that requires people to do things differently. Let's face it, these days, because things are always changing, organizations constantly need to be upgrading the technology that they use, and innovations that are required increase the rate of change, and that can be stressful too. And of course, as you bring people into the workplace, the people changes can result in new relationships, and new relationships can be stressful too. And again, you have to remember the teaming, forming, norming, storming, norming stages are always going to be in place. So getting through that storming stage with new relationships is really, really important. So as leaders, we have to help facilitate that kind of change. So thinking about workplaces today, we often talk about getting leaner and meaner. And hopefully not meaner, but definitely being leaner. That means organizations are downsizing, and then people are taking on a lot more responsibility. And so many times organizational leaders have more breadth of people that report to them. And so with re-engineering and new management initiatives that are coming about, it really is important to remember that that's stressful for employees. And when people are let go in an organization, there's something called survivor syndrome. And those remaining employees may be fearful that maybe they'll be gone in the next round of firings. Or maybe they feel guilt because that they've lost colleagues and they have stayed with the organization. So, and very often it's stressful because when people are let go, people are given more responsibilities, and those responsibilities can feel like it's overwhelming. And we as leaders, we have to help people deal with those changes. So I want to share with you a few basic lessons from organizational change. Number one, people must be flexible and willing to change. And this is important in thinking about values and goals. So when we hire someone, we have to hire people that have similar values to the organization, and really help people recognize how their values are important in accomplishing organizational goals. One of my favorite things to talk about is your attitude. People need to have a positive attitude toward lifelong learning, and that helps people remain viable in the workplace. So with changes constantly coming in and out, it's really important that we as leaders model having a positive attitude and help people see the value of maintaining a positive attitude. These days, with so many changes, constant education is important, and it's a survival skill, learning how to learn and constantly investing in personal growth through education. And let's face it, each of us as leaders are in charge of managing our own career, and perhaps it's even better when we can help people that report to us manage their their own careers also. And then we have to remember that changes can be expensive. So this is why we need to do change the right way. And that's what this video is all about, really helping understand change as a whole. Let's face it, change is so prevalent in today's workplaces. Some studies show that 42% of North American companies have engaged in 11 or more change initiatives over the past 5 years. And with this change frenzy, people can become cynical. They could feel demoralized. Change comes with good intentions, but when change doesn't produce the kind of improvements, people really can get upset about change. So we have to remember that employees may feel like they're overstressed, and that as leaders we may be creating that stress for them if we are not wise in helping people understand how to navigate that change. That really is important. So frontline employees, their typical response to change could be resistance. Middle managers really could feel squeezed by both top management and their employees that report up to them. And then top managers could feel isolated because they're the ones who are creating the change, and they're expecting people to follow through, but they probably feel a little bit of guilt knowing that it could be stressful for other people. The goal of top management really isn't to make people feel stressful as much as it is to keep the organization healthy. So it really is important that top management not underestimate the impact of change on the lower levels of the organization. Likewise, middle managers, really knowing that they feel stress, they have to have the right information from people that report to them and people that are reporting, that are expecting that change, the top management. And more than anything else, we need to remember that frontline employees feel threatened by change, and often with that will come denial and resistance. So we can push back, or we can help pull people through the change to help make those transitions go as smoothly as possible. So let's talk about managing people through change. People judge change by how it affects them. One of my favorite sayings, and if you've watched other videos, you've probably heard me say this before, but Maya Angelou shared with us that we don't always remember what people say to us, but we always remember how people make us feel. And I think that's one of the most profound things that we as leaders can remember. Changes can be personally disruptive in people's lives, and this is why people push and resist against change. They feel lost control, and many of them really dislike change, and we don't want people to feel out of control when people really need to feel like they have some control, and that really is important. So really helping people feel not just like survivors, but help people see the value of the change is one of the most important things. I'm going to give you 7 basic rules that will help guide leaders through change. 1, we really have to have a good reason for making the change. 2, we need to make sure that we personalize the change. We have to help people understand why the change is important, and help them understand the gains and the losses, and so people need to feel positive through the change. We as leaders need to implement the change thoughtfully, and doing so, we need to remember that maybe taking things a little bit slower, being able to constantly communicate with people through the process is really important. Help people adjust physically and mentally through the change. The goal is to be able to bring people through the change successfully, and so this really takes a thoughtful leader. Sometimes you can wisely put a respected person in charge of coordinating that change, and when there are people that are respected, generally speaking, that's where the trust comes in. And so helping people with proper training that gives them the right knowledge, which helps adjust their attitude, and it gives people the right skills in order to support the change. One of the most important things that we can do in order to support employees properly is to make sure that we are always telling the truth. Communication is what we use to be able to share and exchange ideas, but it also builds trust. And when we are speaking the truth and being open and honest and thoughtful, remember how we say things matters the most. Those are the things that are going to build trust. Likewise, we also need to be patient for the results. If we rush change, that can be really destructive. Rushing things can come at high cost, and you've probably heard me say fast is slow and slow is fast. So really recognizing that everybody will adjust to the change differently, but pushing people too hard may actually cause things to fall through, and then fixing those problems takes a lot longer than it would if we just did it right the first time, right? So really being patient for the results could ultimately pay off. And then being able to acknowledge and reward people. So when you're planning the change processes, make sure that you are building rewards into each phase so that people really feel like the change is worthwhile, and we're giving them a feeling that the change was a really good thing. We have to keep in mind Lewin's three-step process, and it's a really simple model, but number one is unfreezing, reducing, or eliminating a resistance to change. Number two is moving to the desired state, and that really involves two-way communication. And then living by the new conditions is pointing out the successes and rewarding people. And so the refreezing people into the desired state really is important, and you can do that by creating a culture where trust is high and people see the value of the change, and help people feel good about changing with the organization, because change is going to be one of those things that we continue to talk about, that it's going to be constant. The only way to move from the boardroom discussion to the on-job reality is to help managers and workers understand, share, and commit to a vision of change. And so when people are involved in the change process, they're going to be able to have greater levels of commitment, as we continue to talk about, right? Because change has got to be consistent. So going back into Kotter's 8-stage process, and we're going to review these. Number one, establish a sense of urgency, and that involves examining the market and competitive realities, identifying and discussing crises, potential crisis, and major opportunity. Step two is creating a guiding coalition, putting together a group with enough power to lead the change and getting the group to work together like a team. Developing a vision and strategy. Number three, creating a vision to help the change effort, and then developing strategies for achieving that vision. Number four is communicating the vision, using every vehicle possible to constantly communicate the new vision and strategies, and having a guiding coalition role model the behavior expected of each of the employees. Number 5, empowering broad-based action. Getting rid of obstacles, changing systems and structures that undermine the change vision, and encouraging taking risk and non-traditional ideas, activities, and actions. Number 6, generating short-term wins. This is my favorite. Planning for visible improvements in performance or wins, creating those wins, and then visibly recognizing and rewarding people who made the wins possible. I think it's one of the most important stages, and they're all very, very important. But really helping people feel good about the change should be our goal as leaders. And then number 7 is consolidating gains and producing more change. Using increased credibility to change all systems, structures, and policies that don't fit together and don't fit the transformation vision. Hiring, promoting, and developing people who can implement the change vision, and then reinvigorating the process with new projects, themes, and change agents. Number 8, anchoring the new approaches in the culture. So, change is hard, and being able to help people get better performance through customer and productivity, oriented behavior, better leadership, and more management. Articulating the connections between new behaviors and organizational success, and developing means to ensure that leadership development and succession management are in place. There are always going to be things that come up that you have to plan for. I know that sounds interesting. So let me share with you some common errors. Allowing too much complacency, failing to create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition, underestimating the power of a vision, undercommunicating the vision by a factor of 10 or 100 or even 1,000, permitting obstacles to block the new vision, failing to create short-term wins, declaring victory too soon, and neglecting or anchoring changes firmly in the corporate culture. As a result, the consequences could be that new strategies won't be implemented well. Acquisitions don't achieve expected synergy that's required. Re-engineering could take too long and cost a lot more than expected. Downsizing doesn't get costs under control. And then quality programs don't deliver hoped-for results. So it really is important to remember that you're dealing with people, not robots. So empowering people to affect the change really is what smart leaders do. Communicate a clear, compelling vision to employees. If employees have a shared sense of purpose, it'll be easier to initiate actions to that purpose. Make structures compatible with the vision. Things maybe not aligned properly, and so that can block the needed action. So great leaders are always removing obstacles and being aware that changes need to be made. Provide the training employees need. Without the right skills and attitudes, people feel unempowered. Align information and personal systems to the vision. Unaligned systems block needed action. Confront supervisors who undercut the needed change. Nothing disempowers people the way a bad boss can. If managers fail to display commitment to a change, it's difficult for employees to be supportive. So really remembering that your organization is only as strong as managers allow their people to be. So we have to consider the role of each individual. In dealing with change, employees are faced with uncertainty and a lack of role clarity. So, 2 rules really should be considered. 1, contribute more than you cost, and 2, make your customer your first priority. No organization is strong unless they have customers who continually rave about the above and beyond service or products that they're receiving. There are major changes in today's world that need to be considered by all organizational leaders. Technology, as we've talked about before, is a major influence both at work and at home. The pace of technological and social change is rapidly accelerating. The speed of communication and access to information is always increasing, and there's always an increased reliance on self-help versus institutional helps that should be considered. And one of my favorites to really recognize is that most workplaces are becoming even more diverse, just like our clientele is becoming more and more diverse. So there really is these days a great variety of living arrangements. There's a greater variety of work arrangements. There is a growth in population, including cultural and ethnicity. There is a globalization of world economies. There's a trend towards breaking of traditional values and social order. And let's face it, the truth is that attitude really makes the biggest difference for each individual. What a person does when change occurs depends on a person's attitude. Attitude affects happiness, it affects effectiveness, and well-being. There are people with the attitude of being a victim versus the people who view change as a challenge, which are you. Life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it, as a wise person once said. So really recognizing that our attitude truly can make a positive difference. So we have to model attitude, and we have to be aware of our employees' attitudes too. Let's be aware of the denial resistance stages that will naturally take place. Then there's that exploration that will happen, and then responsibility, and then commitment. And different people have a different curve as it relates to responding to change that we have to consider as leaders. Not everybody is going to react the same way, but we have to be aware of those different stages, right? Positive reactions happen when people believe that change is the right thing to do. So as leaders, we get to help shape people's attitudes. We have influence on the nature and processes of change as leaders. We need to constantly be showing people the respect of as human beings and help them champion the change successfully. We, of course, need to expect that the change will result in personal gain and help them see the value of their contributions in doing so. And we have to help people believe that this is the right time for the change, and it must be. So change could mean loss, and so we are not dealing with robots. Help people understand, and we have to understand as leaders too, elements of security, confidence, relationship, direction, possessions. Those kinds of things very often change in organizational change. People need to recognize that change can be stressful, and so we, as a leader, we have to help people deal with the loss realistically, and acknowledge what the value of the old change. We also have to believe that it's never too late to change your attitude, right? We get to choose our own attitudes. And then at each phase of the attitude curve, there are strategies that can be used to help you deal with change. So where we focus, that's where we're going to get our results. So really being wise in recognizing that there are people who deal with change differently. What we want to remember as leaders is that people can get burned out, and we can get burned out. And so burnout really could feel like failure. We could feel worn out, we could become exhausted, and we really have to recognize that each of us deal with change differently. Let me share a few symptoms of burnout that you can be aware of for both yourself and for your employees. Physical fatigue, lack of energy and low vitality. Psychological fatigue that includes depression and loss of sharpness in thinking and feeling. spiritual fatigue, which is a lack of interest in the meaning of life, resulting in unhappiness and pessimism. You could have different types of burnout victims. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. One is super people. These are people who want to do everything for themselves, and they let anyone down. Workaholics, driven to meet unreasonable demands. And then burned out Samaritans. These are people who are always giving to others and receiving little in return. Of course, you'll always see people who are good at doing their jobs but don't like their jobs, and we have to be aware of those people. Mid-career coasters, people who once were high performers, now their enthusiasm is gone, and of course stressed out students. And those of us who are in school, we know how stressful it could be to hold down a full-time job and take on a full course load, right? So we all have to avoid burnout and help our employees avoid burnout too. And there are no single age, gender, ethnicity, or creed. Everybody can get burned out, both white-collar and blue-collar workers, and it's widespread throughout our whole society. The thing that we need to know is it could be harmful to our health, it could be harmful to our relationships, and it can be harmful to organizational effectiveness. So every organization is only as strong as the weakest person. And so as leaders, we need to help make sure that we're aware of the signs and help make sure that we're being proactive in helping people through the change process, right? Some examples of some emergency aid for dealing with burnout could be simply taking a deep breath and doing some deep breathing. That can have amazing results. Being aware of our self-talk and making sure that it's positive. Taking a physical retreat can really help people deal with burnout well. And then the human action is really, really important. Making sure that employees have friends that they can talk to in order to deal with the change effectively. Some short-term actions that as leaders we may consider is reducing workload, setting priorities, taking care of our body, and accentuating the positive whenever possible. Long-term solutions really have to do with clarifying values, renewing commitments, making lifestyle changes, and developing personal competencies. Both the job and home represent sources of high stress and burnout. So it's important to have at least one safe haven, and a person facing stress on the job and at home at the same time. These people can become prime candidates for burnout. So really be aware of where you are and your levels of stress in your life. As a leader, you can help prevent burnout. You can do this by, 1, clarifying the mission, goals, and values of the organization and live these personally. Always clearly communicating role expectations. You can help maintain a healthy work environment and help people meet the physical safety and emotional health needs, and then manage work processes so the individual and the groups are neither overloaded or underloaded. We have to help maintain an effective balance between continuity and change, and then foster a spirit belonging to teamwork throughout the organization. Also, it's important to remember that we have to allow people flexibility to work at a pace and manner that will personal satisfaction and also maintain productivity. It's important to provide people an opportunity for ongoing involvement in decisions that are affecting them. Making sure that you have career development policies and activities that help people achieve their full potential. Remember Maslow's highest need. And then providing assistance in times of stress. Some of the strategies to help maintain or manage the stress properly is to maintain a safe and organized work environment, clarify work unit goals and objectives, be sure individual job expectations and instructions are clear, evaluate workloads and deadlines, and have regular reviews to provide accurate and timely feedback. As leaders, we need to be showing patience, understanding, and supporting people in dealing with employee problems properly. We have to deal with personality differences directly and constructively. Remember, our biases and our mindsets could affect our perception. Coach and develop employees in order to help them meet their full potential. And then make sure we're involving people as much as possible in the decisions that are affecting them, and keeping those communication lines with an open door policy are so important. Let's talk about job stress a little bit more. The NIOSH report that 40% of U.S. workers say that jobs are very stressful and extremely stressful. That's 40%. Of Americans with stress, they say that 82% of their stress really comes from their work. 35% of Americans report that their jobs negatively affect their physical or emotional well-being. So if we don't want to lose our people, we need to making sure that we are doing things properly. We have to keep in mind that new technology is always changing, and so people's skills are needing to be updated, and their tasks need to be changed appropriately. Our workforce is becoming more diverse, and so we have to make sure that people have the right skill sets and understand each other's values in order to work well together. And I'm also talking about generational differences too. Those perceptions of generational differences can create stress in the workforce. And above all else, we have to remember that we are in a global marketplace. And so, the organizations are constantly having to find ways in order to compete more effectively, or they go out of business. We've seen a lot of organizations in recent years who have gone out of business, and who thought Amazon would become the biggest retailer in the world, right? So things change, and so people have constantly got to be thinking about all of these factors that can create stress, and then help make sure that people are properly supported. So organizational structuring can be extremely stressful, and that includes mergers, takeovers, re-engineering, and then right sizing. Changing work systems in order to be able to properly move the organization forward. The good news is that the majority of U.S. workers are psychologically sound and coping well with work and life in general. And attention and resources in many organizations have been focused on helping people be healthy. The bad news is that substantial numbers of people are afflicted by job stress syndrome and don't enjoy this condition, obviously, and struggling with personal and family problems. Life can be very stressful, and as leaders we have to understand that. We have to help protect the well-being of workers. So that means making sure that the jobs are designed well. We have to be evaluating the systems and detect psychological disorders of employees. As education of workers is becoming more and more important, managers must be aware of the signs and causes and effects of stress and be able to help people deal with psychological disorders by helping them get the help that they needed. And then we need to do things in order to be able to create a work environment where mental health is considered for our organizations, as change is always happening. Work behavior that leads to Kariyoshi syndrome is important. It's extremely long hours and late night work that can interfere with normal recovery and rest patterns. Working without holidays and breaks can cause people to burn out. Having high pressure work without breaks can cause even more stress, and extremely demanding physical labor and continuously stressful work without any kind of release can cause severe stress. So helping men and women work through stress is really, really important. We have to understand people's home life. Do they have children? Are they being overloaded? Are we depending too much on each person? Some people may be holding down a job and raising a family, and at the same time that can be stressful. The pressures can cause conflict and frustration both at home and in the workplace, and so we have to be aware of that and be able to help manage things properly. Putting the right preventions in place by seeking the correct and fundamental causes of the stress, and then being able to make the appropriate changes in the conditions in the physical environment, including occupational safety, physical work, comfort, work design, and participative management initiatives can really help reduce stress. Some secondary interventions or prevention strives to reduce the severity of stress symptoms before they lead to serious health consequences. And some examples of could be stress education, health assessments, and wellness programs. A tertiary prevention includes the treatment of health conditions to lessen the impact on personal functioning, regardless of the source. Typical reactive to existing problems is provided by medical personnel and EAP programs or employee assistance programs. Let's talk about wellness programs. Basically, there are 3 different levels. Level 1 include newsletters, health fairs, screening sessions, posters, flyers, and then classes. Level 2 provides specific training such as physical conditions, proper methods of performance, and performing physically demanding tasks. And level 3 is creating an environment that helps people sustain healthy lifestyles and behaviors. The stress-resistant person really has the adaptive capacity to transcend adversity and emerge stronger than ever before. It really is a critical attribute of effective leaders to be adaptive to change. Leadership requires stress resistance and being able to survive the negative experiences that we all feel through change is really, really important. And finally, it's important to know that you can become a stress-resistant person and model what it takes to be effective in managing stress. And so you'll be able to accomplish a lot more, and you can stay healthy if you can remember to find comfort in any situation. Don't be in a rush, and remember that people have lives and should feel like their job is an important part of their life. You can help model being relaxed and confident. Being physically fit really is important, so getting enough rest, having enough exercise, eating the right types of food, and then modeling the right kind of control and strength. So remember, as leaders, we need followers. We need our followers to be healthy, and we as leaders need to be healthy. So helping people through change and burnout is absolutely important. Thank you so much for all of your valuable time sitting through the end of this video. I hope that I've given you a few things that you can use to be able to help people manage change more effectively, and even more importantly, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.